Welcome, everyone, to the ICSS Sunday Morning Marxist Forum. My name is Alan Miller, and I am a member of the program committee for ICSS Sunday Morning Sessions. We're based in Oakland, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, USA, and our weekly programs are online via Zoom every Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Time. You can sign up at our website, icssmarks.org. That's icssmarks.org to receive weekly email announcements for our Sunday sessions. You can also view videos of past sessions, send us a message using our contact form, which again is at icssmarks.org. We also want to call your attention to the coffee cup icon on our homepage and our donation page, where you can make a donation to support our programs. So let's get started. On June 3rd, South Korea will hold a pivotal presidential election that follows a year of political turmoil that included a declaration of martial law on December 3rd that was quickly overturned by massive nationwide protests. We have a timely program today titled Korea, Revolution of Light, Resisting Dictatorship, Defending Sovereignty. Our speaker, Simone Chun, is a researcher and activist and a professor who's on the board of directors of the Korea Policy Institute, kpolicy.org. Simone will update us on the current situation in South Korea and what's at stake in this critical upcoming election. We'll start as usual with the presentation, and after a short break for announcements, we'll have a group discussion where you can express your views and ask questions. So with that, welcome, Simone. Go ahead and start your screen share, and we'll get started. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be part of this great program. And let me share my slides. Share.
Sharing is on, and we're waiting for the slide to come up, and then you can start your slideshow.
Okay, so I'm going to have a slideshow. Everything works?
That's good. Yeah.
Okay, let me see. It's still loading, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so as you know,
You're on. It's working.
Okay, perfect. So the title of my presentation is Korea's Revolution of the Lights, Resisting Dictatorship and Defending Sovereignty. There might be also some Koreans in the audience, so I will just also say in Korean. 대한민국 빛의 혁명, 독재의 저항, 주권 수호. I want to start with the brief summary and outline of my talk. Not only just focusing on the election itself, but my goal is to place this great democratic resistance in the broader historical and also theoretical perspective. The big issue is that it's against imperialism and repression, and a long genealogy of the Koreans' resistance. And the broader question that I want to ask is, what does the democratic resistance in Korea reveal about the enduring legacies of imperialism and the current threat to sovereignty? So I think this will resonate this question will be applicable to not only Korea, in other countries as well. And the very broad argument that I want to make is that Korea's long tradition of resistance, that is from the March 1st movement that was 1919 all the way to the current movement that we're looking at, 2025, the Revolution of Light, offers a profound genealogy of struggle against imperialism, authoritarianism, and primarily U.S. intervention. I will skip some of the historical foundation, but I'm including this because it's very important to look at the historical context. So starting from all the way anti-colonial movement, that is, as I mentioned, 1919. 1919, March 1st movement was as you remember, Korea was under brutal Japanese colonization. in the very harsh environment, there was a massive nonviolent uprising, and which contributed to the liberation in 1945. Nevertheless, Korea was never became a unified, truly independent country, as you all know, immediately divided by the superpowers primarily, and the southern part of Korea is being occupied militarily by the United States. And resistance continued. And then throughout the Cold War and Korea's series of dictatorship, authoritarian rule, Koreans, as you can see, still carried the spirit of resistance. The most recent one being not the most recent one, but well known in the Western media and also as students, is the 1980 Gwangju uprising, which was at the time was a major massacre backed by U.S. Military. Moving fast forward, again, the reason why I'm saying is this: the current movement is not just something that happened, and it just carrying this long history. 1987, there was a June Democratic uprising, which also finally led to now the direct presidential elections. Despite democratic transition, there's, as you remember, happened in many places in the world: Brazil, Mexico, India, everywhere. There's a country we're facing this series of capitalist impediment against that undermine democracy. So 1997, the major IMF-induced crisis, which completely almost destroyed Korea's economy, which then still Korean peoples resisted, and there's a massive, especially union-led movement, and continuing this spirit of resistance. And finally, one of the last one in 2016, there was another major candlelight revolution that was impeached the Park Geun-hye's President Park Geun-hye. So now here we are, where we are. Right now we are Yoon Suk-yeol, that is the far-right president, who was impeached, removed. How was he impeached and removed? He was elected 2022. He led one of the most in most recent history, repression with far-out alliances and aggressively backed by, especially at the time, the Biden administration. And the context also was that one of the largest and also the most aggressive US-led war game happening right now, which will also happen in August in a couple of months. In that context, December 3rd, as Ellen mentioned, Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law. It was illegal. There was no national crisis. As you know, martial law can be only declared by when countries under the war in a major catastrophe. None of that happened, and simply to maintain power, persist his authoritarian regime, and pursue the U.S.-led geopolitical to serve U.S. geopolitical interests against this new war against Korea. So what led Yoon Suk-yeol was that Yoon Suk-yeol was he was very closely elected, right? 0.7 election 2022. And the reason why Yoon Suk-yeol became such promoted was specifically by Biden administrations. Biden administration promoted him, empowered him to serve his U.S. geopolitical interests, which through the U.S. Korea Japan Security Alliance, called JACAS. U.S. war games, outcome control, which means the U.S. has the control of Korean military during wartime, and Washington's constant political cover and interference. So that's the side that we are looking at. So what happened? I said the 124 days revolution of light. The reason why we say 124 days, this refers to the December 3rd, the night of martial law, and April 4th. That is when Yoon Suk-yeol was impeached. Yoon Suk-yeol was impeached and by the Constitutional Court. We're talking 125. And I said revolution of light because it's previous one was candlelight revolution. So this was revolution of light because a lot of it started with this light stick that was usually used for K-pop, artists, singers. And during this process, a lot of this, young people, right, women and college students, and they joined this movement. They bringing this light stick for K-pop artists. So it became so those people who led the older generation also, oh, this looks so cool. So this is how it became Revolution of Light. It's a broad-based resistance, labor unions, farmers, students, women's group, religious leaders, and most importantly, overseas Koreans. You guys are based in Auckland, and there's right now is the most progressive Korean Americans. And there's
Simone, maybe you could lean in a little closer. People are having difficulty. It's a bit muffled on the mic,
okay.
so
Is
just
it
try and
better?
get closer.
Is it better?
Yeah, I think unfortunately that's the case. Yeah.
Okay. So let me move my. I guess I will make sure to stay closer. So it was a nuclear protests, public trials, cultural performances, and finally there was victories. The martial law was rescinded, Yoon were impeached, and the Constitutional Court upheld the impeachment. And if you look at the scale and scope, this is where actually I wanted to focus on. A lot of time, if you look at the Western media, well, there was a martial law in the now election. What's missing is that the role that Korean people placed. And I'm going to provide a very detail because this is where it's important. This is because I'm interested in the people making history. I'm interested in the people who are weak, who are powerless, who are disempowered, disenfranchised, how they can actually make history. And it sounds like propaganda almost, but I think this is the case that I'm trying to make is it is possible. So over 10 million participants in 67 mass protests. It wasn't just one week, it was a series and organized. It was consistent. And there was a 1.5 million online actions, more than 1,000 speeches, 140 kilometers marched, medical aid provided by professionals, etc. I will go more in detail later, but this is some of the basic point. And the importance of Korea, the powerful unions, Korean Confederation of Trade Unions that led nationwide strikes and sustained the momentum. As you know, unions provide one thing that differ from Korea's resistance from, let's say, United States and elsewhere is Korea have very strong labor movement. They can provide the organization, they can provide the discipline. 500,000 workers mobilized in February 2025, and against not only the Yoon's martial law, but also broader capitalist exploitation. So some of the timeline we already know, and basically what had happened is that the way that if you look at the Western media, the way they frame, despite this massive, broad, popular democratic movement, the Western media looked in the opposition as this pro-Commun, pro-North Korea. It's backed by China. They also weaponized disinformation, and they also mobilized far right from the United States. And they also said this is completely distorting the real issue, never addressing the underlying reasons for this democratic uprising. And requesting Korea, the only way Korea mattered as far as the United States is concerned is that this is where it's the frontline state for U.S.-China confrontation. So there, I argue that despite the amazing democratic uprising, what you have is there's structural crisis that's going to undermine Koreans' attempt to maintain democracy and sovereignty. So, for instance, U.S. think tanks, media fueled by Yoon's legitimacy, and they militarized, far right empowered by Ironclad Alliance, so-called U.S.-Korea Ironclad Alliance. An OPCON system, the one that I mentioned about the Americas having control in the wartime Korean military, and Washington's geopolitical ambitions overriding Korean sovereignty. So what I would like to is to propose call to action. 4 things: support, reclaim Korean sovereignty and the U.S.-led war games, and push for peaceful coexistence with North Korea and regional diplomacy, and dismantle authoritarian infrastructure. All those, the Yoon who led the martial law, illegal martial law, collaborators, and this time they have to make it accountable and challenge far-right propaganda, which is a lot of them coming from the United States, and also right now inciting political violence, the way that the United States far right have done somewhere, even Ukraine and elsewhere, and support broad democratic movements, and therefore stand in solidarity with Korea's pro-democracy struggle and demand the U.S. stop obstructing Korea's constitutional process. So these are the pretty much basic point that I just wanted to summarize. The rest of my talk, I just wanted to show some of the images and slides that can, bring the living history. To make this point, I would like to say, this is life against the imperial empire. And Korean Revolution of Light, it shows the power potential of a collective and peaceful resistance. And once again, Korean history reveals a pattern. When people rise, foreign domestic power again consistently try to undermine, and nevertheless, the people persist. So the bottom line of my argument is that greatest threat to Korean democracy is not really within in Korea, but is external domination. As long as the Americans have that imperial power of Korea's domestic sovereignty and its democratic foundation, there's going to be continued threat. So that is pretty much my outline. And let me look at now go back to election. Let's look at some of those the way Western press report the election. This is from New York Times. It's an important issue. It's a women's issue, but still, New York Times will rarely, if you want to say never, address some of the things that I just mentioned, the underlying cause of this democratic uprising. They sort of pick on a couple of popular issues. Another is this one is actually American Enterprise Institute, and it's another U.S. media. This one, it says that the way that some of this front runner of the candidate Lee Jae-myung as hard left faction of a pro-left political party. His sympathizes on North Korea are matter of public, even more recently, his romantic fascination with the China and CCP and the CCP. Just give you the way that American media reports. This sounds somewhat outrageous, but I think a lot of Americans probably will agree with, right? This is the way the American media, Americans getting from the American media. How about, this is the way CNN covers political chaos. They never mention about the courageous democratic uprising. It's all about chaos, turmoil. How about the BBC? What you need to know. And you read it, but there aren't much substance, BBC. They look at the candidates, basis. The frontrunner Lee Jae-myung, far-right ruling party candidate, Kim Min-soo. Lee Jun-suk, another far-right candidate. And this one, interestingly, this is the only left party candidate, number 5, somehow his face is covered. But anyway, then maybe that's the point. And now looking at some of those other examples of coverage. The Economist, who will be South Korea's next president? If you read it, there aren't much, again, substance. Reuters. So in other words, I'm showing this as Washington, some of the major Western press is showing that they really don't, there's no serious reporting of issues or either, or even people's movement. Explainer, this one, Al Jazeera has some interesting, basic information. At least they give you the information, how many people are going to be voting. What are the voters by age? This is, I suppose, this is a little bit more informative, and also that they even actually give you the map. The map, unfortunately, you can see that this is northern part of Korea, which I always see. It's always kind of painful to look at only the southern part. So this is nevertheless, this is the geography of the election. And some of the key issues, which I would, if we have time, we'll go over later. But at least this newspaper give some facts, more informative: democracy, economy, North Korea, birth rate, relations with the U.S. and China, women's rights, etc. So I find that this is a little bit better, but not still very. Therefore, I don't I hope that I'm not being too promoting my own website. So I created a Korea Update Daily. I created this blog about 2 weeks ago. I wanted to because I found such a Western coverage is so insufficient. So I hope that those of you who are really interested in getting the news, I hope you can support my website. But anyway, I'm going to look at some of the quickly the blogs posting that I have done. This is the most recent one. It's a final campaign. Rally is going to be just tomorrow, and which is possible, which made it possible specifically because of Koreans have protested, right? Despite a lot of uncertainty. I myself were part of the movement, and but it was just every time when we thought we almost made it, there was this incredible amount of anxiety and uncertainty, and there was a really Yoon Suk-yeol is not going to be impeached. He will be in power, and still there is a good possibility that the far right will still may prevail. So this is the context why it is important. Let me skip this one, and here I want to go to more in depth, the one that I mentioned about the extent of a people's movement. So this is, I think, in the beginning of my talk, I gave you a summary. I think it's important. One thing is that I want to emphasize is that literally I want to say who made this election possible, which is in 2 days. It wasn't just Lee Jae-myung, the front runner. It wasn't just the political parties. Specifically, these are the people. We're talking about 10 million, 1 million, 2 million, 1 million volunteers, sign language interpreters, doctors, nurses. So this is what we're making of revolution, right? Lawyers for democratic society, 1,000 lawyers defending, citizens providing, coffee, food, heating trucks, hot packs, water, toiletries. If the overseas Koreans, I myself, we donated for the fund for providing food trucks. 1.5 million citizens online, National Assembly petition, just constant petition. Because you wanna, when we say revolution, we always associate with the violence. So how do you make peaceful, non-violent revolution, which is the key, right? How can that happen, right? So this is what I want to say. This is what the Koreans did. There's arts, right? There's campaigns, gallery exhibitions. There was the poem, singing, solidarity, fasting. In the very uncertain moment, hundreds of people, like the hunger strike, fasting. There's lectures. There's a book drive. We read a book together, book club, and ribbons, people's square, and symbolizing collective hope and resistance. Labor unions, foremost, very, very important, which, my research is about labor unions, so I would love to talk about it, but that's a pivotal role. Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, they did a general strike. They had an alliance between labor unions and pro-democracy protesters. And without the labor unions' support, probably I would say it would have been very difficult. And also not only that, farmers who are suffering from the Yoon Suk-yeol, the neoliberal, ultimate radical neoliberal regime, they mobilized. They literally, drove their bulldozers and they participated. Irregular workers who are now, all of us right now under constant threat of layoff, irregulars joined the labor strike. And so it was really true growth. And most importantly, this is what young women, they played the revolution of light in a way. One of the key players were indeed young women, girls, right? So this is, as you can see, the very broad. So it wasn't just, in Seoul, 6-7 protests, Busan 50, Ulsan 50. These are some selective numbers. I didn't include all of them. Jeju, the island, 29. Not only that, this is where I get very excited. Overseas Koreans, we talk about Europe, Frankfurt, Stuttgart, Munich, Paris, London, Asia, Tokyo, Osaka, Fukuoka, in the United States, New York, Washington, and also in Seattle, Los Angeles, Atlanta, San Francisco, Toronto, Mexico. And so this has been a truly not only nationwide, worldwide. Again, going back to the history of Korea, 1919, even March 1st revolution against Japanese were, a lot led by Koreans overseas. We are looking at the same tradition and history. So what is the consistent theme that we're looking at, which media refuse to report, is that to demand U.S. and demand that the constant the war game that the United States doing in the Korean Peninsula, that become underlying source of destroying, threatening democracy, and this U.S.-led anti-China, this new Cold War. So I think that this is where the big picture that you want really also major issue that you can see in the mass media. Now, so let me skip this one and looking at so far I look at some of those the history, more details about the movement, and also about how this election on June 3rd has come about. And I'm looking at Bruce Cummings, who is a famous American historian. In the very beginning, he's just during the very hard, difficult moment of the democratic movement, Revolution of Light, he says, he actually predicted, it seems to be actually correct. He says the President Yoon is the first of his country's leaders eager to be a stooge of both Washington and Tokyo. His impeachment is testimony to the strength of Korean democracy. I think that's what he's telling the truth. It is the strength of Korean democracy, despite all this structural impediment. Going back to again, not only within Korea, what else is happening? This is probably it's in Korean. You might be wondering what you're talking about. Although the election will be taking place in 2 days on June 3rd, overseas Koreans have already voted. How many people voted? This is a number. Close to 80% overseas Koreans have already cast their vote. So these are the numbers here. Germany, China, Japan, United States. Right? What I'm saying is that history is being made, led by Koreans in part, overseas Koreans. So finally, about the election. So these are the 3 candidates. The front runner, Democratic Party. This is the ruling party, far right, Kim Mun-soo. This is another right-wing candidate. So these are the competition. But there is actually one more candidate that they don't even register. It is Democratic, a Labor candidate, which I would, hope to mention a little bit. So this is what's the snapshot of the polling result, the most recent polling result. As you can see, it's considered Lee Jae-myung, the Democratic Party, opposition party, is expected to win. But nevertheless, this morning I read the poll which shows some were arguing that Kim Mun-soo has the far right party has caught up with it, and now it's very neck and neck. I'm not sure if it's true, but that's I also read. There's more polling result. So this is the ruling far right party candidate, and they're saying that if you vote for Kim Mun-soo, it means that it's a continuing, resurrecting Yoon Suk-yeol. And this is the Labor candidate that I wanted to actually pay attention to. He's right now is about his approval, the support is about the less than 2%, but he has served it's a labor human rights lawyers who is trying to resurrect this left. In other words, his argument is that 2 parties cannot possibly represent the workers' interests. So he declared his presidency. I hope to get a significant amount of votes so that we can chart the beginning of another more left party in Korea. This is interesting because Kwon Young-gu, he was giving a red card to Trump. He's saying that Trump cannot dictate what we should do about our economic policy. Specifically, this is obviously you can see that it was more we put his face, but not his uniform. But anyway, the main point is that he was declaring giving red card against Trump. So I'm showing some of these campaign the candidates. This is a right-wing candidate, young 40-year-old Lee Jun-suk, who created controversy by making very horrible sexual remark against the women, and just to distort the real issue. And so this is the way that you can see that how the campaign is completely, not only by Koreans themselves, is being not misrepresented. So here's finally the frontrunner Lee Jae-myung, who is most likely, all polls shows that most likely he will be the elected. And so with regard to Lee Jae-myung, to give you a brief background, he was human rights, labor rights attorneys, and also he has led a series of he just not only just worked in the democracy and labor movement, he was also worked as a governor and also long time mayor. So he has a very long sort of career as an administrator and as an elected leader, and he's serving right now National Assembly. He's the chair of he was a chair of the Democratic Party. So he's the and as you know, he lost to Yoon Suk-yeol 2022 by narrowest margin that is about 0.7%. But most likely he will be the front runner. So this is Lee Jae-myung. And it's going back to some of our my posting. You know, Lee Jae-myung, we may have, if we become president, we will have the first Korean president who is actually a child laborer. He was too poor, and he didn't have he didn't even go to have a formal education. Junior high school. He was admitted to law school by purely with his own study, and so that's where his background, and declaring his candidacy. And I'm looking at some of my blog postings to show that what are the key issues that should be important. I feel that this is an important pivotal moment for U.S. foreign policy, because it's going to contest the way United States, this new Cold War against China, how Korea is becoming sort of a means to pursue that policy. So one hopes that this, for the reckoning, the moment of reflection for United States, that you need to listen to Koreans, what they want, not what the America's geopolitical interest is. As you can see, that the one that I mentioned, there's 80% of Koreans oppose Washington's new Cold War. So Koreans definitely, if Lee Jae-myung get elected, he will have to incorporate this public opinion. Now one of the campaign themes emerging is that we want to build a true Republic of Korea, not the one that is dominated and subordinated to the United States. It is a turning point for peace and sovereignty. And sovereignty is becoming a big keyword. In fact, Lee Jae-myung proposed that he's going to name his administration. It's not Lee Jae-myung administration. He's going to say Korean sovereign administration, sovereignty of a people's administration. Again, revolution of lights. And one thing that I also wanted to point out is that, going back to the structural constraints, impediments, that is that the consistent United States interference. This is the latest, a very controversial remark made by the U.S. Forces Korea Commander, General Javier Brunson. He referred to Korea as it's just fixed, he literally said fixed carrier for U.S.-China show, fixed carrier for America. What it means is that I find that this is very outrageous, completely disregarding the nation and the people. You're just looking at the means to pursue the U.S. war against China. So I think we wanted to pay attention to this kind of rhetoric from Washington. And then, as I mentioned, this revolution of light didn't happen. It just decided this one. This is continuing carrying the spirit. When we talk about, even myself, when I said, should I continue to participate? I always thinking about what my friends during 1980s, some of my friends who were in jail, who couldn't survive, who couldn't graduate the university because of their involvement in democracy movement. And I feel that thinking about, actually their contribution. Let me skip some of those slides because I have a cutter. Another issue that some of you might be interested in, will, for instance, suppose if Lee Jae-myung get elected, will there be any policy in Trump's, the U.S. North Korea relationship? And this is actually an interesting op-ed by Austin Hedrick. There was the American Friends Service. They did the survey and said the Americans actually think that Trump was right. He said, about 70% of Americans support Trump's engaging with North Korea. So, which is, I think, probably we should also push for. This is the Labor Party that I mentioned that was being sidelined, and he was actually showing how, we will not yield to the plunder of our economic sovereignty to Trump. Again, I'm going through all this because to give you snapshot of what the real issues are. Again, the sovereignty issue is important. And also another posting that I did was this continuing, very persistent U.S. far-right interference. Right now, there's a so-called delegation of U.S. delegation of election monitor in Seoul. And it's not formal, it's a legitimate, but it's a private far-right group now visiting all these different polling sites and then saying that this doesn't look good, and they're actually, YouTube broadcasting. I think that which should be actually sanctioned, and it's important to because they're going to continue to have an important role in it. So let me skip some of these things I already mentioned. So probably we will. I can go and now I want to pause here and let's. These are some of these slides that I prepared, but I think it will probably come up in the discussion. So going back to about the U.S. far-right, the interferences. And I want to pause here because these are the three far-right U.S. Groups who member, and they're right now in Korea, are involved in this interfering with Korean election. So I want you to pay attention to each of them and who they are. And you can see that they don't really reflect the Korea's interest. They are heavily funded, powerful, and interfering in Korea's election. So they hold a press conference May 27, and they even have this very fancy website calling that the Koreans, it already looks, they said, are claiming they're fraudulent elections, and they're already questioning legitimacy before even June 3rd elections are being held. So this is one thing that I hope that we can pay attention to. This is the Korean version of the same US-led far-right. It's very, 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 very well-funded, and it's becoming very powerful organization. Let me go back to, I want to keep some of these, skip some of these slides and go back to very last one. Finally, I want to go into the very beginning of my talk. That is, this is the revolution. This is led by ordinary people, broad coalition. It's called, this in Korean, it's called the 빛의 혁명, 민주주의 지키다. It means that the revolution of light protect democracy. It's 시민들이 기록한 대한민국 역사. It means that citizens recorded, citizens wrote Korea's history. So I want to give you some of the images, what they will look like, what they will look like. What did they do? The one that I mentioned about all these people, lawyers, young women and labor union leaders. Famous image about the one young man stopping our vehicle. Korean female lawmaker stopping, right, in front of the soldier. We're talking about millions, and I mentioned million, 1.5 million. It's a consistent. As you can see, the flag, all these different flags show how the broad is diverse, pluralistic. I wish I could read all this Korean word to give you the idea of how broad this is not just about led by political parties or a few political parties. This is about, we're talking about citizens, true people's revolution. Again, the same image. There is the political party, Justice Party, International Progressive Party, Green Party, labor unions, electronic workers unions. We're going to make a new world. And then so this is the Korean farmers leading the march. This is the Green Party, Korean's Green Party. You can see that a lot of young people joining for workers. And it was very hard. It's people camping overnight. It snowed, freezing cold, still kept going. Not only that, in overseas Koreans, we're talking about Los Angeles, we're talking about Chicago, we're talking about, it looks like it's New York, Manhattan, Boston, Frankfurt, Japan, Sydney, France, Paris, Ireland, and finally back to the Korea. This is one of the difficult moments. We thought that we were going to lose it. So a lot of people went hunger strike. Led by whom? Korean writers, blacklisted writers. It says, we declared the removal of Yoon Suk-yeol. The hunger strike. And I felt that during that time, I felt so desperate. I said, South Korea must keep up our courage against anti-democratic forces. Something that, and people continue protesting, farmers. We never stopped, right? 1 million Koreans. So in a nutshell, the point that I'm making is the struggle still continues. I'm not romanticizing, glamorizing our movement. What I'm saying, the point that I want to make is that very concrete movement happened. People resisted, but nevertheless, we have continued to face obstacles. I hope, and this is my last slide. I hope that this is said that this is artist rendition of Koreans who were protesting in snow and freezing weather. It says, we're still dreaming of a new Korea. Thank you, sorry, we're cheering for you. And the artist rendition. And I thank you so much for for my talk. And I'll pause here. And my final words that support my new blog. It's not great, but I hope that you can, with your solidarity, probably I can keep going. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simone. Actually, if you could put the link to your blog in the chat, that would help. Okay, after a few short announcements, we'll have questions and comments from participants. To ask a question or make a comment, you can raise your hand by clicking on the reactions button, raise hand at the bottom of your Zoom window. And please keep your questions short, ask one question at a time. to allow everyone to participate. And keep in mind that this is a comradely forum for political discussion. Please show respect to other participants and the moderator of today's session. So just to kind of give you an idea of what we have coming up, we have a couple of upcoming programs. On June 8th, Mark Albertson, military historian and frequent presenter on Sunday mornings, will speak on the history of the Great Patriotic War, 80th anniversary of the end of the war, and its impact on post-war geopolitics and the Cold War. On Sunday, June 15th, Program Committee member Raj Sahai is going to be speaking on the nation state in the era of capitalist decline, with a focus on the recent events in the Indian subcontinent, including the terrorist incident in Kashmir and the subsequent war between India and Pakistan. We want to remind everyone that you can sign up for email notifications for our programs at icssmarks.org, where you can find links to videos of past recordings, past programs, and you can contact us with feedback, suggestions for future programs and topics, and make a donation to support our Sunday morning programs. So, with that, what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the question and answer part of our session. And again, I want to urge people to go to the reactions button, raise your hand, and we'll try to call people. We'll get everybody in and call in the order in which you raise your hand. So we'll start with Richard. If you would unmute and ask your question. Go ahead. You should be able to unmute now, Richard.
Me? This Richard?
I'm sorry, Richard Wright. Yes. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay.
Thank you for clarifying.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation, Simone. Just as a little background, way back when, I used to be part of the Korean Information and Action Project out of Eugene, Oregon. Anyways, I had two questions I wrote down, and I hope I'll be allowed to give them. One was given your presentation of the depth of against Yoon, the depth of the demonstration against Yoon. How was he elected to begin with? And the second question I had is, could you maybe present or contrast the Korean labor movement in Korea, Korean labor movement, versus that in the United States? Why is it they seem to be so much more powerful, or more mobilized than what's happening here? Thank you very much.
Do you want me to respond?
Yeah, we'll do one question at a time.
Let me try to quick. Yoon Suk-yeol was elected 2022 with the narrowest margin of 0.7%. At the time, there was a last minute merge between Yoon Suk-yeol, the ruling Yoon Suk-yeol, at the time the opposition candidate, and also another conservative candidate, Ahn Cheol-soo, who had a considerable sort of a middle centrist voters. So last minute merge between the two led to very close victory to Yoon Suk-yeol. Those of you who know that Yoon Suk-yeol is also, there is a sort of a rumor or speculation that I read that, as you know, Yoon Suk-yeol was nominated he was appointed as a head of top nation's prosecutor by Liberal President Moon Jae-in. As soon as he was nominated, actually, there was some interest from the United States, who obviously, the United States never was so enthusiastic about Korea's liberal leader. So there was what I read, where there was some attempt by United States, Washington, to empower someone who can contest liberal Moon Jae-in regime. So apparently, Yoon Suk-yeol was also contacted by some of the CIA operative, and so as soon as he was appointed as prosecutor, he was already groomed to be the challenging the liberal administration. So that led to give a short, basically the last minute merge between the between Yoon Suk-yeol and the center-right candidate An Chol-soo led to close victory. Second thing about labor unions, why Korean was so powerful. If you look at numbers, they may not be so powerful. Unionization rate in Korea is still about somewhere 15%. Although it's considerably increased under liberal Moon administration now, but heavily repressed by them. Now, two things. One is the more progressive Korean Union, that is Korean Confederation of Trade Union, KCTU. Actually, the union was actually not only just formed not only to address the workers' interest, but actually they were part of democratic transition. So that's why it is. I said the unions are very, and also they're also working for unification, the peace issue, etc. So that still may not explain why it is still powerful. Another thing powerful is that, as part of Korea's, a lot of them are students who protested against dictatorship in the 60s, 70s, all that. And a lot of them were related to the democracy movement. That always, as you can see, even right now, right, you can give the impetus. It is a pivotal, powerful force that empowered the Korean Union. Now, United States, I think perhaps some of you know better than I think United States unions have been has been too bureaucratized, too professionalized. I feel that it lacks the mass base. I think that one of our colleagues in Korea Policy Institute, Marty, he probably has a lot of, he's still working working on the issue of American unions. And I think that's the major issue. In other words, Korean unions are powerful because they have that's very closely tied to always addressing not only workers' issue, but also broader democracy and also sovereignty and national unification issue.
Okay, next is Citizen One. So please go ahead and unmute. Citizen One.
Yes, thank you very much. So, Simone, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Yeah. So Simone, please feel free to disagree with any of the implicit premises of my question, because you certainly have enough experience in this country. So please do so if you want to. So my question is that as you know, I just got a pop up. I'm sorry, I have to clear that. As you know, and as you've been talking about, if I'm correct, there's been a hard right spike in South Korean society, including a spike in misogyny, amazingly, including many young South Korean males. U.S. Hard right spikes are usually based on white hard right backlash to perceived Black and brown relative progress. But Korean society is more or less a homogeneous society, so I can't imagine that there's that aspect to it, or things like racial wokeness and racial identity politics and all those bugaboos of not only the hard right white in American society, but often of white leftists in American society, sad to say. So if you could comment on what has produced this, again, if you agree with this premise, the surge of the hard right in Korean society, if indeed it wasn't always there, or if indeed it's not often there. And again, including, this mysterious spike in misogyny, even among young South Korean males. And again, feel free to disagree with any of, the so-called facts that are in my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. It is a fact that the misogynistic sentiment is rising, and I wouldn't say it's as strong as the way portrayed in the media. And one thing is, I think this, as I briefly showed one of the right-wing candidate, the 40-year Lee Jun-suk, who actually epitomizes this rising misogynistic man. I would say that a couple of things. So in other words, I said I acknowledge your statement as a fact. One is economic issue. That is that obviously all of us are under this brutal neoliberal economic structural condition, and as economic crisis, inequality increases, people tend to like to blame someone else. In the United States, we blame Mexicans, immigrants, and all kinds of people, and so there's blame to it. And in Korea, some why it's because of women not taking all the jobs. Gender equality is leading, empowering women, and also women don't have to go to serve mandatory military service. So men are actually disadvantaged. That's also something that their male misogynistic people are saying. So economic issues, factors that are unique to Korea. And also, most importantly, I think that this, as you know, we are living in a very these days, online internet has a very different way of forming public opinion and views. And you can see that we're all talking about, I feel myself, or not, we're dinosaur. Young people we're looking at very, new generation of people whose views are shaped very different way. And but most worrisome is that, again, going back to this far-right movement, this is actually very closely also connected to this international far-right misogynistic movement. This, in the case of Korea, is actually embodied by this new far-right presidential candidate, and they make it this issue, issue as it's almost like trying to impose their view as a mainstream view, right? And so I think that those are my comment. In brief, yes, there is an increase of misogynistic view. Why in Korea? Because of the specific, in my view, is the economic issue, coupled with the unique Korean societies, factors unique to Korean society, and thirdly, again, in this globalized internet, globalized environment, you have that impact.
If I may just add, and again, feel free to correct me in line with my question. There's almost kind of a young incel movement among young males in South Korea. Is that true?
Young, what was that?
Say again?
Young what movement?
Incel, INCEL.
I am not sure what that
Yeah,
Okay, I'll forgo that for now. Thank you.
on the other hand, I
Okay.
can also point out that I have 3 nephews. They're all late 30s, and also so there I would consider they represent Korean young men. One of them is a firefighter, and another one is the computer programmer. Third one is a manager. So they're all, one servant, public servant, the other is the other 2 are working in private sector. Now, none of them, to me, not because of my nephews, I'm saying this, none of them identify with what you just said, misogynistic, young Korean male being misogynistic. They have family, they serve public duties honorably, and so I cannot. So what I'm hearing is that only through internet media, my immediate family and friends and people around me, I don't see them, right? But it seems to be, so you don't see that kind of, in fact, when this Legion's, the 40-year-old misogynistic presidential candidate made such a horrible, sexually violent remark in the presidential candidate viewed by millions of Koreans, including children. And it was a young male university student who came out protest, against him in the campaign rallies. So I think that we have to put things into perspective. And also, again, this role of media, what gets reported, what's not. So.
Okay, next is Mehmet, followed by Rich J. So Mehmet, if you would unmute, please, and ask your question. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for a very informative presentation, and I really enjoyed it. I've never seen a working class that I have seen so disciplined and so, very militaristic as in Korea. I visited South Korea and actually participated and walked in the first line of KCTU marches. And so I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to come back to Korea again, but I was very impressed by their militancy and their determination. And on December 4th and 5th in San Francisco, we led two demonstrations against the coup. One was at the Korean consulate, and the people coming out of the consulate were actually very sympathetic to us. So that tells something. But I'd like to come back to something that you emphasized in your presentation, is the sovereignty. That is very interesting because in all the developing world, sovereignty seems to be the main demand of the people. And seeing this in Korea is very interesting. So sovereignty, although we may think of countries as being sovereign just because they are a country, it doesn't mean that they are sovereign. And they have ties, market ties to imperialism that makes them not sovereign. So if you can please comment on the business side of it, the corporations, Korean corporations that work with imperialism, whether they are towards, they like the sovereignty or they want sovereignty, or are they happy with their relationships with the imperialist countries and the market shares that they are allowed to have in the world? Thank you.
Amazing comment and question. Yes, I'm so glad that you had the opportunity to participate in the KCT rally. You know, my doctoral dissertation was about the formation of the role the working class played in South Korea's democratic tradition. And by looking at the formation of what I thought the first Labor Party, which I think was 2000, between 2000 and 2005. So I have interviewed, countless factories and interviewed workers. So I still remember that the one time I was looking at this, Hyundai workers from the Hyundai Motor Company in Ulsan, they were just hundreds of workers were just finishing after their work. They were going home on a motorbike. And it was just an amazing, when we say workers, numbers matter, right? So it was just a powerful scene of these. Koreans, definitely, I agree with you. The Korean workers have been disciplined, very organized, and carrying that tradition. And I hope that you should play a greater role in the next new administration. Now, about the sovereignty for Korea, yes, that's another your excellent point. The sovereignty, it is a key issue. What is unique about Korea is that the Korean other countries, like India, Pakistan or Brazil, Mexico, they have a certain amount of sovereignty that Korea has. They have certain amount of sovereignty. One sovereignty that Korea does not have. Korea does not have sovereignty in the military sovereignty. That means that, as I pointed out earlier, OCAN. OCAN means that Korea's the wartime control of military belong to the United States government. So that's one thing that's the only country in the entire universe that OCAN does not have. The country does not have OCAN. So that is one thing that different Korea from the rest of the world about sovereignty. Another about sovereignty is about the economic sovereignty. That is, absolutely, you're right. Korean capitalists, I mean, they have one thing that did you see in my presentation? Did you see any protests from the businesses? Zero. Sound of silence. So that says a lot. They have. So I wouldn't say. In fact, did the labor unions, they're specifically, right now we're all talking about impeachment and all that, but the reason why labor unions so powerfully joining this movement was specifically to contest that the Korean business is capitalist alignment and become part of the collaborators of the imperial domination, which is hard to break it, right? Despite of these millions of people joining. So I would say, yes, I agree with you. Korean business, they're pretty much they're empowered, they're created, they're empowered, they're sustained, they will continuously be sustained by international global capitalist financial interests, supported by especially if it's administration is a right-wing administration. So there are this concrete constraint that Korea faces, like almost all countries in the world, in the other side of the world. Yes.
Okay, next is Rich J. If you would go ahead and ask your question, followed by Raj.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's a great. I appreciate everything you said, focusing a lot on the labor unions and the economy, and give us a clue about, in spite of our lack of proper coverage by U.S. media, that people are out in the street. And I hope so. Here's my first question. You spoke more than once. You mentioned more than once something like 1.5 million people that are showing up again and again, not just a one-time thing, and not just 100,000 people or what, 1 million. It's a lot of people. And so my question is, it's like 2 or 3 questions all at once. It's all the same thing in a way. It's just a detailed question. What's the population of South Korea and then North Korea, the total population, both? And then from South Korea, what if you even know, which most people don't know this about their own country, the number of registered voters, or you could say the number in a democracy question, how many people actually vote. So 1 million is a relative to whatever. Those questions I asked, those are part of the whatever. Very important, because 1 million doesn't mean anything unless you know how many people are in the pool. In other words, well, okay, I don't want to repeat myself. That's it. The other thing I just wanted to mention was that I know I've already asked, and I know that I believe that your focus, at least in your educational work, is that you're not you haven't spent a whole lot of time and had a chance to go deeply into the North Korean current situation. I just wonder how the people are doing. I was on the 38th parallel when I was 16 years old for a day and started to get an idea. Oh my gosh. So I guess my question is, can you speak at all to how you feel about North Korea, and as things change in the South, how that's affecting North Korea, or Korea is affecting the South Korea, or whatever, their policy, etc. Thank you.
Well, that's I did think number is important. So I said that June 3rd, when the election will be held, about 44 million Koreans will vote.
Wow.
That includes the 258 more. Close to 260,000 overseas Koreans, which, as I mentioned, already voted. 80% of overseas Koreans voted. So when talking about 44 million Koreans, so we're talking when 44 million registered voters. So when we say that each weekly, monthly protest between December 3rd to, let's say, April 4th, I say weekly 500,000, 500,000 to, depending on the time, the event. So that's a that's a lot of people. So I think that another one you want to looking at is that the consistency, the almost like routinized protest that matters. And moreover, I would actually, one thing that I didn't include in my talk is that, we have in Korea called this the candlelight action, which is a weekly candlelight action, which started 2022, immediately after Yoon Suk-yeol was inaugurated. So it going to some right now. It's about the this last week we had the 147th candlelight action. What it does is that every week we people gather and they protest. So protest is a weekly protest. So that's so if you look at the numbers, so total Korean population, North and South Korean population will be together we're close to 80 million. So that's the basic numbers. About North Korea. North Korea, of course, as Korea, I am the post-war generation. I never been to North Korea. I'm not allowed to go to North Korea. And I have only met North Koreans twice at a conference in Hong Kong when I went presented at a conference. And so that's the extent of my, the direct contact with North Korea. What do I feel about North Korea? I think is that we are one nation. It is divided for now almost since 1945. It's the historical, the most injustice that should not be, they should not sustain. And there are a lot of more. I want to point out that I am totally from Southern red. I don't have any family in North Korea. But right now in the United States, we're talking about 200,000. My number could be wrong, but Koreans, we have families, relatives, friends in North Korea, and they have not been able to unite, especially under Trump administration and Biden administration. For Trump administration, that now again they still make it illegal to go to visit North Korea. So I think we have in this state. I think it is the greatest human tragedy of the 20th century. Now it's going into 21st century. Going specifically about this is why I pointed out the one thing they wanted to point out is that if Lee Jae-myung win, I think the expectation is that Trump should continue engage with the North Korea. Whether it's a summit or other engagement, we should work for a peace treaty, ending Korean War, and focus on the going back to sovereignty issue, allow Koreans inter-Korean engagement. As you know, Trump did in his first Trump period, he did a series of negotiation, but and despite your criticisms, at least he tried, and there was an opportunity. I think a lot of Koreans would like to see that again, and the Korea will be ready. Lee Jae-myung has a long time. I met Lee Jae-myung when he came to Boston when I was teaching there, and I actually had personally met him for several hours and discussed about Korea's issue. He came to Harvard specifically at the time to give a talk about the Korean Peninsula's peace issue, and he was very committed. And I would expect that he will be able to implement his ideas. So this is, I think, a truly exciting time for if next administration will change administration. So my short, quick answer to your question is what I feel about North Korea is irrelevant. It's more important what Koreans, Americans in the United States, how they have suffered. And I personally, strongly, I will do whatever I can in my ability to work for the peace agreement and the permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula. And for that, I think we need Americans. as you point out, we point out that 70% of Korean Americans support Trump to, re-engage. And also, last time when I saw the poll, only 2% of Koreans saw the North Korea as an enemy, whereas, of course, most of people designate China as the greatest enemy. But that says that I think Korea has been a victim in this sense, that has been used as a means for the Americans, war against other countries, including China and Russia, etc. And I feel, I don't want to go on about the victim consciousness, but I think that is also true.
Okay, next is Raj, followed by Janet. So Raj, please go ahead.
Hi, Simone. Thank you for your talk. I just looked up Wikipedia. It says population of South Korea is 52 million. So probably voting population would be less than 44 million because children must account for about a third or so who can't vote. So I suspect it's probably closer to 30 million. Anyway, you know better on that. My questions are two. Given how organized Korean working class, I'm surprised that the left candidate got only 2% of the vote, or is polling or estimated to get 2%. What explains that? And secondly, Yoon is the leading candidate from Yoon's party. I wasn't clear. Which party does he belong to? Is he from the more liberal party, the leading candidate, or Yoon, I suppose, was from a conservative? Please clarify that. It's my own confusion. Sorry about asking that question. I should know better. Thank you very much for your talk.
That was actually, I think it's my apology, actually. I did I give some of the details. Sometimes you think, well, I know, but they must know. But anyway, so I had a massive amount of slides. So, excellent question about Labor Party. So, Labor Party, what the short answer to that is that Labor, the left parties have been marginalized, divided, not only but because of their own internal problem, but also because of Korea two-party system. It's like, in the United States, no matter how hard the left tried to do, all ended up with two parties, right? So that's kind of similar situation in Korea. It's a presidential system. It's although we have different electoral system, we incorporate some of the multi-member district proportional representation. Unlike the United States, you have only single-member districts, so you always ended up in two parties. But Korea has that despite that the other electoral system is two-party system, presidential system. So like the United States, the Labor Party, Progressive Party, Left Party have a very hard time sustaining. Right? So that's one thing. About the internal problem of Labor Party, I said, right now the support rate, he may not even get 2%. Is that long time ago, I feel like 2002, when I went to Korea, when I thought I was so excited about this is the first birth of the first Labor Party. In fact, 2 years later, that Labor Party became third largest party. So that's the moment that I was waiting for, and they did it. Now, what happened? They did it because of the Koreans have this very, a lot of under repression. Korea has a national security law, right? Which means that all about against North Korea. It applies to pretty much all the workers anybody who disagree with the ruling or conservative, they probably will be somehow subject to national security. A lot of repression. The repression against the left party have been so vicious. And so left party simply, and also that within left party, there was, different, Argentinian left are also known for division, right? So that's also, eventually left party did not sustain, and they split, divided, became two different parties. Now it's come back to, now we have a Labor Party candidate. Actually, the more progressive left party, Jimbo Party, Progressive Party, didn't even declare. It didn't have now the presidential candidate. They actually sided with now the Democratic Party, Lee Jae-myung. They thought that it's so important to unify because last time we lost it by 0.7% at the time because of the the Progressive Party, Jimbo Party, took about, some, how many percent, about 30,000 votes. So basically, a lot of people blame that marginalized left party. So that's why the Labour Party is still, let's say, 2% below 2%. And despite the strength of union. So the point, two-party system, presidential system, that's it. About what was the other question was, a ruling party. Yes, it's important to know. Ruling party is called a misleading name. It's called the People's PPP, People's Power Party. Has nothing to do with the People's Power Party. So a lot of people are confused. This is a kind of radical party for the conservative, I would say. So Yoon Suk-yeol was a ruling party, right? PPP. And so now the candidate, Kim Moon-soo, interestingly, he was the most radical in his student days. He was the most radical student activist. I mean, not just progressive, he was a really radical activist, labor activist, who completely did he's a born again, far right, anti-labor. Also, he's like believing like born again Christian fundamentalist. So that's Kim Moon-soo. Right? So he is the ruling party's, People's Power Party's candidate, who are trailing behind the Lee Jae-myung, who is the Democratic Party candidate. So that's the ruling party. So and yeah, that's, I guess, thank you.
Just for clarification, which party was Yoon from? Who was?
Yoon is PPP.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Janet, please go ahead and unmute.
Sorry, thank you, Simone. So I was struck by your next to the last slide with the militarized police and the elder woman sitting on the ground in front of them. I wondered if the police there receive Israeli training, and what the position of the people there on the Palestine situation is. But also, it was difficult for me to hear early on in your presentation. Maybe what I'm about to ask, you talked about. Since the U.S. controls the South Korean military, that's what I thought I heard you say. I'm wondering if you could talk more about what sovereignty would or could look like if one of the non-ruling party candidates wins, versus the continuation of how it is now. And does the president have control over the police in South Korea?
First of all, one of the last photos of older women, and behind the backdrop of a police presence it's not from this protest. It was actually, I always liked that photo. This is actually the photo of taken in site of Seongju. Seongju is where this rural watermelon, farming community were completely now occupied by U.S. military, partially because of U.S. THAAD was installed there, and the Korean farmers have, protested. That was since about 2006. They protested, vigorously against the deployment of U.S. THAAD. That has nothing to do with the Korea's, security, but it's pretty much about, about the surveilling, and also it's the military movement in China. Right? So that is but that's community, as you can see, the rural, community. The movement, they also had a weekly, protest for many years, still going on, was actually led by older Korean women who have been there for generations. So that's why that picture was, I think, which also symbolizes, again, my overall theme of the Koreans' resistance. So for instance, when I say, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I remember, something that my mother, said, what she did, the Koreans who may not even be ordinary Koreans, who may not be, so politically active, but in their everyday resistance, right? They suffer, for instance, my mother, who's endured Japanese colonization, Korean War, dictatorship, and although she passed away many years ago, I remember she, always the way she carried, So that's what I think Koreans remember. It's about the history. It's not just about, I think, what we learn from textbook or media. I think history is very much ingrained within our family history. So I think that's where I felt that image was kind of, I can identify with it. I can see that my grandma, right there, my grandma, who was maybe, she didn't like the Japanese colonization, and so about the U.S., so what the sovereignty in the U.S. control? Okay, so first of all, the Korea will have, in fact, the opposition party candidate, the frontrunner, Lee Jae-myung, his campaign pledge is that he will get the OPCON, wartime control of Korean military, back from the United States. And within his term, he said, well, of course, he's trying to be very centrist. He says, with the cooperation of the United States. So that is the official line. So in other words, what that means, translated into what it means, it means that the United States will not be able to declare war or start war in the Korean Peninsula. Right now, if Korea can be dragged into to war that Korea does not approve of, because the United States have the OPCON, the military OPCON control of the Korean military. So, for instance, as you remember, the United States, the latest from Washington Security establishment, they all say that U.S. Army in Korea is not just, it's beyond, it's a global force. Korea has a pivotal role, which means that, Korean, they should be involved in, America's war elsewhere, like, maybe potentially in the Taiwan Strait issue, China war, if any happen in China. So that's why it's the Koreans to reclaim the OPCON of military is key. Koreans does not want to fight the war that does not have involved its own national interest. So that will be the more concrete term. Another about the sovereignty issue will be that, again, the U.S., the heavy presence of, you have Korea's American troops. There's about close to be exact, 28,500, or some people say 30,000 American soldiers. Their American U.S. military bases is all over the entire Korea. In fact, the agreement, U.S.-Korea agreement signed, the security agreement, a mutual alliance signed between two Korea, literally to exactly this language. The United States has the freedom to create any military bases in any part of Korea. So that has to be also changed in the what we call, when truly call sovereignty. So, for instance, let's say, what if Canada says Canada has the right to create any military bases in any parts of the United States? It sounds ridiculous. So I think that's another part of sovereignty. And also, the third sovereignty issue will be that the Koreans will be able to, again, going back to this global capitalism, it's very important to Koreans, especially for the working class. It's important for them to be able to, reclaim kind of their idea of a sovereignty. Workers gain control of, being able to contest the capitalist, global, monopolistic, multinational corporation that includes actually, of course, domestic Korean Jebel, the powerful conglomerates.
Okay, James, if you would unmute, followed by Keith and then Lucy. So James, please go ahead.
Thank you, Simone, for the presentation. Your talk was timely for me because I just started reading A Hidden History of the Korean War by Eye of Stone, and which presents a narrative that basically sets the stage for the U.S. occupation and domination of South Korea as a sacrifice zone in what the U.S. military viewed as an inevitable war with China and Russia.
Yeah.
And it seemed this was a view also pushed by Formosa. There was a heavy lobbying from Taiwan during that period. And it seems like this view is resurrected now that China really acts as a sovereign state and did not really succumb to U.S. capitalist domination, including the Formosa lobby, it seems to me. And can you comment on the narrative in Hidden History, and do you think it matches your understanding? And then a second question is, how much do you think the Korean demographics with an aging population and low birth rate play in the current South Korean politics?
Yeah, this book is actually true. I will recommend all of you. And also, I'm honored to be very acquainted with this new edition. We have the introduction by Tim Bill, who is an amazing New Zealand expert on geopolitics in East Asia. Tim Bill and Gregory Illich, who is also the board member of Korea Policy Institute with me. And so they made, I recommend this book to all of you, and especially with the forward. Yeah, I agree with this book is truly eye-opening. It's almost like a journalistic account. So you really get the really close look of what events that was unfolding at the time, which in fact, I read that this book was actually censored and he couldn't really publish at the time. And so I really agree with the narrative that's presented. And, one thing that I want to talk about is that, then I came down post-war Korean generation, and I went to all my education, college, all education, most of my education in Korea, and studied graduate school in the United States. Really, in Korea, I really didn't learn much about Korean War. Korean War research, I learned through, my own sort of schools, a lot of all this, literally the entire education when I was growing, it was all about, education was pretty much just anti-North Korea education. That was it. The bottom line, we had all those uniforms and I remember participating in this speech contest about how horrible North Korea is, evil regime, and I actually got a first prize in those speech contests and all those so coming actually to the United States, I actually exposed to to even Bruce Cummings and it was American scholars actually. If you look at the other side of the role of America, right? The America is still this is country that it's one of the great things about actually United States is they actually have this incredible, in a way, educational system where people from all over the world, country, they come actually here, including myself, and which is still true, right? Now it's being undermined by Trump's policies. So I began to learn from about Korea, from American foreign scholars, and could still continue to learn. And so I agree with this great book, I.F. Stone's and the narrative. The second one, demographic, this is another important issue, which I don't claim myself an expert because I'm usually focusing on this more a geopolitical issue. And it is a major issue. Koreans, read the photo story about, there won't be any Koreans. You don't even need war. There won't be Koreans in, next, I don't know what, within this century. Birth rate is a real issue, demographic, which means that, especially in terms of politics, there are some who argue that the reason why, especially young male who become more conservative, far right, they are not interested. You heard, but they're not interested in unification. They're not interested. They're more, they're less critical. I think I would say that's also, there's also truth to that. I think it's something that those people who are on the left, we are progressive. We have to really pay attention to the young people demographic change. On the other hand, though, I also see that not only in the United States, not only in Korea, because I'm, for most of my life, I've taught interacted with the university student, and now I'm teaching actually right now in or K-12 younger people, one thing that I also find is that, the younger people actually, we have very creative, very new generation that has immense potential all over the world. And in Korea too, I think that from the left, I think we should definitely look at this as a demographic change, population issue seriously, but at the same time to be able to engage with the young people, especially in this with the latest revolution of light, where especially young women in Korea, they're very energized. I think that that's good. That's hopefully sort of potential. And those are my comments. And again, thanks for mentioning about this great I.F. Stone book.
Okay, Keith, followed by Lucy. So go ahead, Keith, please unmute.
Okay, just a couple of questions. First of all, what were the main issues that came up that precipitated the coup attempt by the president? Were the main issues? And also, I also heard that one of the issues was an attempt by the United States to get Korea to either produce or ship arms to Ukraine. So I was just wondering what your comments are on that.
Another excellent question. I'm so glad that you are filling all this gap that in my talk. One is about the coup. A couple of things. One is Yoon Suk-yeol was, he was elected 2022. Again, it's a very narrow margin. He was never been popular. His approval rating was always below 30%. And he was in other words, he didn't have broad support. And one thing that happened also was is extreme. If you think that Trump is right now doing somewhat more personalizing his power, Yoon Suk-yeol was pretty much that very privatizing the public offices, privatizing the power, and especially with his wife, the first lady, in a lot of nepotism, the corruption. Korea's Yoon Suk-yeol he was a prosecutor, right? Top prosecutor. He was basically, there's a word called the Republic of Persecution. Republic of prosecutors. Almost all the major, position was actually by formal prosecutors who led on to this. So in other words, you can see that the massive accumulation of corruption, irregularities, and repression, etc. So as a result, citizens, as I pointed out, candlelight action was held almost every week. Apparently, Yoon was very threatened. It did have power, although a lot of times we felt that this is going nowhere. But apparently, it was very threatened. Second point about it is that the Korea has a presidential system, but it has a national assembly, unicameral national assembly. National Assembly is right now controlled by the opposition Democratic Party, who won the landslide general election in April. So opposition party kept, passing laws that want to investigate Yoon's all the wrongdoings, corruptions, etc. Of course, Yoon vetoed every single one of them, so he became the veto king. In other words, veto every single one of them. But you can imagine, he can be very paranoid and threatened. Third thing is that Yoon wanted to, because of all this corruption and that also the attempt to pressure to investigate, he thought that he can just preempt. So he declared, that's the one reason that he declared martial law. Now, when he declared martial law, he said that actually what he said was also for the entire 2 years of Yoon Suk-yeol administration, we have seen Korea, it was back to pretty much 1960s and 70s when Korea was under dictator. It was the entire regime, President Tower regime was against North Korea. So this is when he began the most hardcore anti-North Korea, so-called anti-communist, pro-American regime, right? And he's like going back to McCarthy era, right? All the domestic opposition, he called it, it's the anti-state forces. I'm literally, you're talking about 80% of Koreans called anti-state forces. And then in the meantime, he gave this complete, capitulation to Biden at the time. All those, and also the Japan, US, Korea military alliance, and specifically provoking also, this is very dangerous. This is an important point I want to mention. He specifically, intentionally provoked conflict with North Korea to justify martial law. Sent the unmanned drones to North Korea, and which all now proved to be that it was ordered by South Korean military Secretary of Defense. And imagine, right, if North Korea has reacted to the drone attack, right? What would happen? Right now, we're talking about World War III. You and I won't be able to right now have this, a nice webinar in this beautiful weather. So that's the extent of the risk that he tried. And thank God the Koreans stopped it. Right? It failed. As you remember, the night, December, it lasted only 6 hours. And it stopped almost by miracle. The National Assembly, when it happened, the Lee Jae-myung, who's running right now, the front runner, he was home. He drove to National Assembly within 40 minutes. If he was late in 40 minutes, he would not be able to support. He did live YouTube broadcasting, say, please come to the National Assembly. Please come to the National Assembly, because those troops are moving into to the National Assembly. And the Korean law, for our constitution, says that president's martial law can be rescinded by National Assembly, right? 2/3 vote. So this is what Lee Jae-myung did. It was a sheer, actually, it was a luck that we were able to stop. So going back to the answer to your question is combination of personal and also geopolitical, and also just the audacity of Yoon Suk-yeol, because he felt that he was got full support by Biden administration. The guy was, politically, he was not even presidential material. He was this prosecutor all his life and empowered, promoted. And even Biden administration said they were even going to nominate him for Nobel Peace Prize. And this is Washington's product. And that led him to declare the martial law. He thought it's gonna succeed, and so it didn't. And that shows again the how significant the Korean people's ability to stop this. The bottom line is we stop a war, potential war.
Okay, we're getting close to the closing time here, so let's go ahead and keep questions on the shorter side. Lucy, followed by Judith, followed by Eugene. So please go ahead, Lucy, unmute.
Simone, thank you so much for your talk. It was very good and in-depth, and I enjoyed all those pictures at the end of your presentation. It was beautiful. My question has to do with South Korea's population, the people, and how they view China and the struggle, the fight against imperialism is the way I see that Donald Trump, although he pretended to be a good friend of the North, he is actually moving towards isolating China and making everybody enemies of China that they can. So I bet that the media in that country, in South Korea, is bombarding the population with anti-China rhetoric like we have here. So does it look that way, and how do people see it? Or do you have any sense of that?
Another superb question. Yes, it is a serious issue. First of all, about the anti-China rhetoric, anti-China sentiment exists in South Korea, and also propelled, specifically instigated by far-right groups. They blamed, in fact, they blamed North Korea, not North Korea, China had something to do, interfere with the general election that led to the opposition landslide victory last year, April, which is false. In fact, the YouTube journalist who claimed that is now actually literally indicted, and he got sentenced to a couple of years in prison. There's also there has been harassment of people who look like Chinese. There's a lot of Koreans, right? Korean Chinese in Korea. And attack on the, people who look like Chinese. Yes, that's also true. There's also Yoon Suk, that's still, we're talking citizen. Now, Yoon Suk-yeol himself this is a whole new different. No previous Korean president, I would say including the dictator Park Chung-il, we're talking 70s, all the previous Korean president, including, I say, conservative, has not really come out that sort of a kind of anti-China, anti-rhetoric. Especially since the 1980s, Korea always trying to be in a more sort of balanced foreign policy. Okay, the typical line is, we support U.S.-ROK alliance, but we want to be also a balanced relationship because China is such an important country in terms of economic relations, and Russia too. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, we also had normalized the relationship with Russia. So it has all the balance. But Yoon Suk-yeol fundamentally changed. So when the leader, when the rhetoric comes from top, such a anti-China, specifically adopting U.S. rhetoric anti-China, you can imagine what kind of trickle-down effect that it's going to have. Now people are going to more freely talk about it. So that is also a fact. I must point out, I admit. But still, I would say, I will go back to my original claim. My impression is that they are not still, it's the majority of Koreans do not feel that way. Now, as I pointed out earlier, and I showed the slide that almost 80% of Koreans disapprove of Yoon Suk-yeol's radical shift against anti-China. Majority of Koreans support balanced. Now, even again, this is where also tied to economic issue. Imagine also the Korean companies that are going suffering. China, it is a fact right now. We're looking at China is, it's a major economic superpower, which will soon probably, not sure overtake the United States, but that is also a fact. And Korea has that national interest to maintain. So I wouldn't say yes, there are anti-China state sentiment, but they are not shared by majority of Koreans. And going forward, Lee Jae-myung is, if you look at the mainstream American media, they're all not scared. Literally, this guy is a pro-China. He's romanticizing, pro-China, but that is also, the only thing Yoon Suk-yeol said was, the only thing Lee Jae-myung said was that he would continue, go back to the previous Korea's position, that is the balanced diplomacy. And he will definitely now we're looking at, we'll be looking at more going back to the previous Korea's position. But I think that I'm worried about this anti-China sentiment going way out of the control. And I personally feel I'm very scared about, even within the United States, that get any harassment, discrimination. We can't even now, a lot of Chinese, I know Chinese, Chinese students or friends, they decide not to visit China because what if they may not, they may get deported or something. So it is a serious issue.
Okay, getting very close to the end. Judith, please go ahead, followed by Jean. So Judith, if you could unmute and ask your question. Judith, you're still muted. There you go.
Okay. All right, so I'm sorry. I have a sick kitten and I came in half an hour late. So, but thank you for the talk. I would like to know, first of all, it seems to me that South Korea is in close to what could be described as a neo-colonial situation. And if you agree with that, could you discuss it? I would like to know the class structure in South Korea. Poverty, poor, working class, middle class, upper class, super upper class, etc. And the other thing is, what are the trade relations with China? Okay, I'll end it there.
Yeah, again, they're very excellent questions. The first answer about China. China is the number one, Korea's number one trading partner. So that, I think that itself should indicate why the Korea's importance of having close relations with China. The second about the neo-colonial situation. It is South Korea's. It is in a neo-colonial situation for the following reason. One is, as you know, the South Korea's Japanese colonization for 35 years has left such deep legacies. What I'm saying is that when Korea was liberated in 1945, instead of independence fighters, let's say, the Jefferson and all those founding fathers, they became president after the America's war against the, independence war against Great Britain. In South Korea, what happened was all those Japanese collaborators, those who became, right back to the post 1945 Korea now. So one, because Americans immediately recruited all those Japanese collaborators. Those people who worked at the police, working for Japanese, and they are in all the major positions in Korea. And not only that, Korea's capitalists who also obviously, in developing country, right, the politics in the capitalists also they are created and connected to the political elite. So also Korea's capitalist major economic elite, capitalists also tied to those those who were groomed, who got empowered by Japanese in the colonial period. So, and also now I can go on and on about the people who are, justices, who are lawyers, all the elite classes are pretty much, we're talking about what we call the Japanese colonial legacy. So that's the one post-colonial legacy. The second one is, of course, immediately the United States. I mentioned them several times about the U.S. because of South Korea's geopolitical interest. It is, in fact, I would say, the most important country in the United States' new geopolitical policy. Right? Look at the map. It's the closest to China, right? The now U.S. number one competitor. Now, that in itself says everything about the U.S.-South Korea relation. And the United States. That's why United States, South Korea's another one coupled with the neo-colonial legacy from Japanese colonization. Now you have a neo-imperial U.S. Militaristic. So that's it. Third is about the class structure. I think this is some major theoretical scholarly investigation. The South Korea's, you have this. South Korea has this sort of a what are called Korean dream, the miracle in Han River. Obviously Korea now number 10th largest economy in the world. Korea is not it is considerably economic power that it claimed to be. But if you look at within South Korea, what's happening? Like everywhere elsewhere in the world, under this neo-capitalist, neoliberal environment, no countries, including the United States, right? We are not in the United States. We are all part of this glamorized, what call wage slave, or if not wage slave or something else. The inequality has increased. Middle class has been shrinking. The the ruling elite upper class, the capitalist class, has been obviously it's really growing, and especially under Yoon Suk-yeol administration, and even with the liberal regime, that's their limit, right? You think the Democrats will do better than we know that what sometimes two parties, the same capitalist parties. So that's the same situation in Korea too. That this extreme inequality between classes, that's going to be the major. In fact, it's going to be the biggest challenges in the new administration. And the poverty has been increased not only because of the traditional people who are in the poverty, but people who are working, but they are in the poverty. Right? I think in my family, I must say that, three of my sisters, I have three older sisters, they are all working, they're older than me. They're in the, although we have a asset, they're I would say they're right now literally like on the below or above poverty line. They work, but that's the way that. And also the most difficult thing about the young people, like the United States, this this lack of job security, mass unemployment. So I think that's the universal, things that happen everywhere. That brings to this forum, why this forum is so important. I think what I'm saying is probably will be shared by, I assume, a lot of people in Mexico, Brazil, Sao Paulo, and India. That's where we common struggle that all of us, working class, whether you live in Seattle, Washington, in San Francisco, we share this common struggle. That is why I think that it's so important for us to have a solidarity. And I think I would hope today's presentation, I hope I show a glimmer of hope. In fact, the other day I was, during this long, uncertain 124 day of the democratic revolution, I was so involved. A lot of them I couldn't sleep. I had to get away. I escaped. I started, escaping to reading fiction. One of them was the Lord of the Rings, which I've been reading. And one of them where it says, it says something like, there's a part where it says, I don't know exactly which chapter it said, history is, what move history. And he said it's actually people who are weak. Why? Because it's for them, it's a necessity, right? It's a necessity. Sometimes you struggle even when there's no hope, right? Not you struggle because at the end there's something going to deliver, there's hope. No, even when there's no hope, you struggle. Why? Because you have to. It's obligation, it's a duty, and it's a necessity. And of course, at the end of the story, a lot of things, the hobbits, they win. But I hope that's today's presentation. I hope to show at least a glimmer of hope. It is possible, and I think we must. We should do what we must.
Okay, we're actually a little bit over time. One last question, Jean, please go ahead. Let's keep it short and we'll wrap up. So,
Okay,
Jean.
well, thank you so much for this. I've never been to Korea. I spent 2 years in Japan and tend to view Asian affairs through Japanese eyes. But, one of our earlier speakers, when he was talking about Mexico, described it as Mexico is, so far from God, so close to the United States. And I'm wondering if that could be rewritten for Korea, so far from Buddha, so close to Japan, because Japan has played such a role in, the first country to be conquered by the greater East Asian prosperity sphere was Japan. And there's all this, super exploitation, the comfort women, all the other kind of the enslavement of Koreans and so forth. So I just if you want to comment on that, that's all. And again, thanks for a great talk.
I appreciate your question. Yes, I think that I spent, in fact, happened to spend actually 2 years, I guess, in Mexico, and that I share the sentiment. And it's true. I think that with regard to Korea, the historical issues about those 200,000 Korean women Actually, mostly they were underage girls who were served as military sex slaves for the Japanese, and the historical injustice that Japan really, they kept saying, they acknowledge they're sorry, but they actually haven't. They still continue because Japan is, about Japan actually, it's the Japan's ruling party. It's all actually pretty much sort of one party that, has been in power all these years, and one party that LDP has been actually recently declassified document from Kennedy administration showed that LDP was created by CIA, destroying all the Japan's the progressive leftist movement right there. And so with regard to Korea, I think Japan-Korea relations, I know that's obviously that horrible history. But nevertheless, the one thing actually I do want to point out, going back to this major theme of people's resistance, comfort woman issue, military sex slaves, that issue became, now you and I know, right? Even my students, 17-year-old student, they heard about comfort woman, it apparently. Why? Because those women, were brave enough, those victims, they actually came up, they start telling story. And the movement became now global movement so only through the people's movement you get to actually expose those the tragedies and the injustices. And about I think Korea-Japan issue relationship will be critical. I think going back to the reason why this March Korea, the latest coup, Yoon Suk-yeol was completely capitulated to that. The U.S. again, I mentioned to the a strategy of forming this triple alliance. I wrote a piece called "The Axis of War: U.S., Japan, Korea." So that he spearheaded. He really he thought that's what that's gonna make him. Actually, he actually dreamed about being being a dictator almost, as long as he can make that happen. So that stopped. So I think that we will, in the next few and going forward, this will be another issue although our group, this audience focusing more on sort of domestic, probably working class struggle and left movement. But it's for countries like Korea, the working class struggle, the class struggle has to take into account the national liberation issue. Without liberation, without sovereignty, it's almost impossible to even to promote and advocate those real, the rights of the working class and working class struggle. So that is why country like Korea has a double, for the fellow workers, there are two challenges. So I hope that we can continue to have a conversation about that.
Simone, thank you so much for your presentation. Great questions from the participants and very rich discussion. Be sure, everybody, to go to our website at icssmarks.org and sign up to receive email notifications for future programs. And stay tuned, watch what's happening in the election, and I guess we'll find out soon. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Simone. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.